Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October joint ITS Georgia meeting. We're really excited to have you here. Just a couple of quick announcements from ITS Georgia. We are putting together Time Capsule 2.0. And if you guys were a part of the annual meeting for ITS Georgia this year, you got to hear from folks who had put the time capsule together before, and we're going to be doing the same thing. So if you have any items you'd like to donate or any kind of letters you'd like to write, those were really awesome. Love to hear from folks from the past. Please get those in. Also, a quick reminder, there's a couple of items on the ballot this year. I'm also the head of our legislative group. There's one on fees so those of you who pay fees for your PE, and you all pay fees when you get rid of your tires and things. There's a note on there for the state will put the fees towards what you're actually paying them for. So if you look into that, decide how you want to vote on that. Also, if you're in government, there's one on sovereign immunity. So take a deep look into that. Take a deep dive. It's not very descriptive. It will no longer protect the organizations, the government organizations, but it appears that it still protects the individuals if you're working for the state or a local government. So just a reminder of that. And now to hear from our sponsor, AECOM, a man who needs no introduction, Scott Moeller.
All right. Well, good afternoon, ITS Georgia and Georgia ITE members. Excited to be here today and to be a meeting sponsor. AECOM is a very proud member of both organizations for a very long time. We have a lot of active past and present board members as well as committee representatives. We also always encourage our young staff when they join the organization or join our organization to get involved with both of these two groups because it's great for their career development and leadership skills. So anyway, what does AECOM do? We are a large consulting firm. We serve GDOT and local agencies every way that we can. Just a few brief highlights of big programs and projects we have going on for Georgia DOT. We recently won the TMC operations contract, and we have already staff operational in District 3 in Thomaston, Georgia. And in the middle of November, we will be taking control of the Atlanta TMC and be fully operational then. We also have the CHAMP operators that run around the state of Georgia are an AECOM program. And we also participate in SIGOPS and work on the various SIGOPS programs that are there. And then probably most relevant to this group, recently we updated the ITS and traffic signal specs. I know that affects a lot of you here. And then the last one I wanted to mention was just Gwinnett County is a big partner of ours, and we do a lot of work for them. We have staff that work in their control center periodically, helping them with signal operations. Also, we did their connected vehicle technology master plan recently, and then we are supporting them from the engineering side on the Smart Corridor project that'll be coming out soon. So those are the highlights I wanted to mention. Thank you again for letting us sponsor the meeting. And if you ever need anything from me, please don't hesitate to call or talk to anybody on the AECOM team. Thank you.
All right, Kate.
I'm Kate Sharon. I'm the president of Georgia ITE. I've got a few housekeeping announcements for us as well. Our engineering outreach committee is looking for volunteers that are interested in doing a virtual STEM presentation with some of the local schools. They seem pretty flexible on topics, so please reach out to one of our outreach committee chairs, either Robert Baker or Ramiro Santana, if you're interested. They're in the process right now of reaching out to the schools, and it'd be really helpful for them if they know how many volunteers they have for this type of event. On Friday, November 13th, during lunch, our safety committee will be hosting a special webinar presenting with Georgia Bikes for a virtual bike safety event to learn more about how to meet the needs of people on bicycles by creating bike-friendly communities, implementing complete streets projects, and increasing bike safety during this unique and challenging time. Registration is now open for the Georgia ITE November monthly meeting on November 19th. With the pandemic and coordinating with student schedules, we're actually going to be modifying our November meeting to remove the traffic bowl and hosting that separately sometime in December. Our November monthly meeting will be a mix of young member spotlights and an introduction of our nominees for the 2021 board. Our candidates for the Georgia ITE 2021 board are running unopposed for president is our current VP, Chris Maddox. Running unopposed for vice president is our current secretary treasurer, Meredith Emery. For secretary treasurer in 2021, we have 2 candidates, Christina Berry and Robinson Nickel. Filling Chris Rome's current position as section representative for the Southern District, we have 4 candidates, Shannon Fain, Sam Harris, Holly Painter, and Elizabeth Shaw. And for our new board member at large position, we also have 4 candidates, Ty Alexander, Sean Coleman, Alan Davis, and Paul Sloan. We'll be conducting the voting through the website like we did last year, which will open in a couple days before the November meeting, with the results being announced at our annual meeting on December 17th. And you'll get a chance to hear from all the candidates at our November meeting. And finally, nominations for the Georgia ITE Awards are also open on our website. Please make sure to take a few minutes to help us recognize some of the amazing accomplishments that our partners and members have been doing over the past year by filling out these nomination forms that we can use for our nominations committee. All of that can be found on our website. And that's all my announcements. Our sponsor for today is All Traffic Data. They had a last-minute conflict, so they were unable to attend today's meeting. They are a data collection firm that operates in several states in the US, including Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Their services include traffic volume counting, origin destination studies, speed studies, travel time studies, parking studies, as well as some other data collection services. Mark Bovin and Jason Holloway are their local representatives. If you're interested in learning more about their services, please visit their website at alltrafficdata.net. Thank you.
Okay, Kofi.
Well, yeah. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. And my name is Kofi Wakhisi. I work for the Atlanta Regional Commission, and I also sit on the ITS Georgia board, and also on the programs committee. And on behalf of the board and the programs committee, we're bringing you some wonderful content today, along with the wonderful speakers. We have 4 panelists, so we appreciate their time today. And we're going to start with Jonathan Smoke from Cox Automotive to talk to you about electric vehicles, which is the topic and theme of today's meeting, as well as infrastructure and charging. Jonathan is the chief economist for Cox Automotive. He leads their economic industry insights team, which tracks the economy, new and used vehicle sales, supply prices, retail and fleet demand, consumer credit and auto financing, and dealer sentiment to understand the key trends impacting both the wholesale and retail markets for vehicles. For more than 26 years, Smoke has focused on translating data and trends into relevant, actionable insights for the industries that represent the biggest purchases that consumers make in their lifetimes, real estate and automotive. Smoke holds a bachelor's degree in economics and religious studies from Rhodes College and a master's degree in business from the University of Texas at Austin. Jonathan, thanks for your time today, and take it away.
All right, thanks, Kofi. I've been asked to give you all an overview of electric vehicles, what we're seeing in the auto market, and a little bit of a review of where we are in the economy. So to do all of that in 10 minutes or so, buckle up your seatbelts. But hopefully I'll give you a good context for the rest of the presentation. I'm going to start first with the question of where are we with the economy? And this is really one of my favorite metrics these days to help explain that, yes, we've seen some solid recovery, but we're not going to be able as a country to see our economy be fully recovered and back to normal until we're past COVID-19 as a substantial risk. Moody's Analytics and CNN Business partnered a few months ago to create this back to normal index, where they're taking high frequency data, which includes some transportation data, by the way, to be able to measure daily our progress, not just for the country, but also by state. And what you can see in the index is that we had solid recovery in the summer, but we hit a ceiling at about 80% and essentially have been stuck there. And the reason we're stuck there is key sectors of the economy just simply can't return to normal. But then when you see how it is playing out state by state, we have some states that are much more impacted and further away from normal, the most severe being the state of Hawaii, which is almost 38% off their level of activity pre-pandemic. And then the most close to normal is Maine. Georgia falls slightly better than the US, down approximately 17% in their latest data. And then to really see how the impact on industry varies, which certainly relates to how those businesses are in different parts of the country, but also directly relates to unemployment and several other data characteristics, is the spending data, which comes courtesy of Verisk Financial and Equifax. What it is measuring consumer spending that occurs on credit cards and debit cards, and basically looking how that has compared year over year. So you can see that how much spending fell on the chart on the left, and here I'm showing overall in several vehicle related categories, and how the progress since. We've got some categories that are actually up on a year over year basis in the most recent data. We had a peak around Labor Day, and since then we've seen some categories like spending at gas stations, which is primarily gasoline, has come down a bit, but is substantially recovered relative to the earlier stages of the pandemic. And on the right, I've got those categories shown in the latest snapshot, what they look like on a year over year basis. And you can absolutely see that travel is the hardest hit category, but it's interesting to me actually to see that auto rental is the least impacted and the most recovered at this point of the travel categories, which makes total sense because people have changed their habits and are doing more road trips. And especially we saw a peak in that activity around Labor Day. You can also see from that data, we're able to estimate what's happening with ride hailing, which has been pretty substantially impacted and actually continues to be a bit behind actually the recovery we see in auto rental. But that's the context for the economy. We're not going to see those sectors fully recover until the risk from COVID-19 is diminished by vaccines, which means we have to have the vaccines and we have to have enough people taking the vaccines. So as we get closer to what's happening in auto, one other category that I think is very important to talk about is credit, because you hear a lot about what's happened with interest rates, but really the Fed did cut rate policy to 0 in March, but that doesn't mean that consumers are seeing those record low rates in all types of loans. It actually varies by the type of loan and the type of consumer. So mortgage rates, for example, have been at all-time lows, but even they haven't fallen as much as the Fed's policy. And in the auto market, we see quite a divergence in rates, but overall, the best rates in the auto market are not quite at all-time lows compared to what we're seeing, for example, in the mortgage market. And there's huge differences depending on your credit tier. So for example, subprime borrowers are actually seeing rates today that are higher than they were a year ago. So it totally depends on who you are and what type of loan you're looking for with regards to, is this a great time to buy or not from a credit perspective. But we can be very happy with the strong recovery that we've seen in the vehicle market. New vehicle sales, which are what is shown on this chart, are very cyclical. It should be no surprise to anyone that when we have a recession, we sell fewer vehicles, and coming out of a recession, we sell more vehicles. This downturn has not been a typical recession per se, but we definitely have seen a huge decline in sales, at least initially. But so far, actually, the recovery has been faster and more significant than we typically see. However, we're not fully recovered, and we're not expecting to be fully recovered for the next several years, actually, mainly because of supply. This has been unprecedented in terms of what happened with the pandemic. We had every factory in the world that produces vehicles shut down, and it resulted in having about 3.5 million fewer vehicles at the worst point. We may end the year down only about 3.3 million vehicles, but in prior recessions, factories were never shut down. So we haven't had supply, and that's actually very germane to electric vehicles, because a lot of the new production and new models that were supposed to be unveiled and starting to sell in the summer this year have been postponed because of the way that the factories getting back up to speed and getting back to production have been delayed. Supply has played a role, but there have been several different factors beyond supply that have influenced winners and losers in terms of who grew share this year versus who did not. The key themes to kind of pay attention to, what separates the green, those who have gained share, from the red, those who've lost share, are strength in hot vehicles like pickup trucks and SUVs. Electric vehicles, you can see Tesla is actually the second strongest in terms of gaining share. And that's actually because electric vehicles have generally done better than the market overall. But it's also related to Tesla's ability to continue to sell because they didn't have dealerships, and many dealerships in certain parts of the country were not able to sell for the second half of March and much of April, and Tesla didn't quite have that same challenge. But then we also see a big shift in terms of weakness this year for those brands that are more dependent on fleet. So for example, Nissan and Dodge historically have sold more vehicles into the rental car market, and the impact on business travel certainly reduced the amount of vehicles that the rental car companies have purchased in 2020. So those are the themes. It's not been consistent, but we are seeing electric vehicles continue to grow. This is the national electric vehicle share of total new vehicle registrations. It clearly has an upward trend. Yes, it's noisy, and that's because we actually haven't had that many different models of electric vehicles. So a lot of the share, as you measure it month by month, can be totally influenced by the availability of that inventory. And actually, if you look at last year and this year, it has been a total Tesla story. The national EV models by volume have been all Tesla for the most part, and everything else is a rounding error. And in fact, in 2019 and much of this year as well, it's really been a story of the Tesla Model 3 as its volumes really ramped up. And then geographically, when we look at where EV sales have been the largest, up until this year, it's largely been a California story. But this year is starting to see that change. This particular heat map is simply looking state by state at the electric vehicle volume change for the year relative to the volume last year. And so all of the green states are the states that are actually growing volume, and the red states are the states that are losing volume on a year-over-year basis. So you see that California is actually not keeping up with its prior volume as electric vehicle adoption starts to grow in other parts of the country. And Georgia is definitely in that category of growth, but we have a long way to go. Georgia was once a leader in electric vehicles back when there was a substantial state tax credit. But as that tax credit went away, so did electric vehicles sales in the state. But you can see we're making progress. We are growing and moving towards a future. And as the prior heat map showed, we are one of the many states that are actually seeing volume growth that's substantial. And over time, we expect that continue to happen. But within the state, where the electric vehicles are largely a function of population. What we see in Georgia is no different than actually what we see in most parts of the country. It is an urban phenomenon that's related to the kind of consumers who are in the urban areas, but also clearly connected to charging infrastructure and the influence that that has on adoption and the attitudes of consumers to adopt. But as we look to the future, I am confident in saying there is no question in my mind that the future is about electric vehicles in the automotive market. You can't see really a multi-year outlook being discussed for the automotive market that is not centrally focusing on the growth in electric vehicles. This chart is showing you the IHS Markit's future forecast, leveraging their data by powertrain so that you can see what the volumes are specifically for electric vehicles over the next several years. We are expecting electric vehicles to continue to grow and in fact see acceleration in growth primarily over the next 3 years with the introduction of many new models. And one of the last slides I'm going to show you is actually some of the exciting models that are coming out and what the range expectations are for those models, which are improving, and that's a key part of consumer adoption. But when we look at it globally, this data is from Bloomberg, and it's looking out further into the future through 2040, and it's looking at the volumes globally. And what those forecasts basically indicate is that electric vehicles globally will dominate powertrains by the year 2037. The US has been behind on this, but we might see more accelerated growth if the election ends up tilting further towards support of green policies, which we think, given what the polls indicate, that that's likely to be the case. So the industry, the world is marching towards an electric future, and that's definitely going to be a component that's going to be influencing what we see around us. And as I mentioned, as you look at what has been formally announced and what is already at work in the automotive supply chain for the US, we have a tremendous number of new models that will be introduced over the next several years. So for example, next year alone has 14 exciting new models that are coming out in the US, and most of them are coming with range that's a significant improvement over what the industry has been seeing. That's actually, each year has the number of models, and each one of them is tied to what the range is, which is what's illustrated on the vertical axis. And so you can see there's a lot of variation, a lot of differences actually in vehicle type, not so much of the heavy luxury orientation that we have been seeing. It's definitely one that I think is going to be generating a lot of the interest and hype in the automotive market. And then I'm going to end with this view, because I think part of what we're going to be talking about also is fleet oriented. And I think a few times we might be discussing autonomous vehicles. So our perspective on that, as we think long-term for the US, is that not only are we going to see this electrification change what the vehicles are sold and what's in place in the US, but fundamentally connected to this is also going to be how those vehicles are owned. We are going to be moving towards an autonomous future, which implies that we're likely to see the role of private ownership decline and privately, personally driven miles decline as a result. So a lot of the focus is going to be on fleets and the infrastructure that's needed to manage those fleets, to charge those fleets. And I want to reinforce that I'm not just assuming that you're on board with the idea that autonomous equals electric, but in the minds certainly of my colleagues and other economists focusing on auto, the autonomous future is based on an electric vehicle fleet. And so we're going to be seeing some changes to more than just the type of powertrain that's behind the vehicles that we drive. So that's everything that I had to share. I guess, Kofi, back to you to introduce our next panelist.
Thanks, Jonathan, for setting the context on EV demand and where we're going in the future. That's very helpful. And next, we're going to have Albert Burleigh. He's with Bluebird. And so he's going to discuss, I guess, a niche market in terms of vehicle EV demand. Albert joined Bluebird in 2007. He's held various positions within the company, including regional sales manager and director of dealer development. As regional executive director of sales, he's responsible for bus sales in the Western US and has led sales responsibilities for the electric bus product line for the US and Canada. Before joining Blue Bird, Albert spent 15 years with Ford Motor Company, where he held management positions in sales, marketing, customer service, and dealer operations. He holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from Louisiana State University and an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. And Albert, thanks again for your time today. We appreciate you being here. And you can go ahead and get started with your remarks.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Again, Albert Burleigh. I work for Blue Bird Corporation. I appreciate you allowing me to be in the panel today to tell you a little bit about our company and our electric school bus products. What I'll talk about today, here's a little agenda, just the background for Blue Bird and alternative power products, what growth we've seen in electric school buses, where we've sold these buses and deployed them, some of the benefits of electric school buses, and we'll talk a little bit about vehicle to grid as well, which is something that's really starting to emerge in the school bus market. So for you that aren't familiar with Blue Bird, we are a Georgia-based company. We have our headquarters in Macon, Georgia, and our manufacturing facility in Fort Valley. We've been building buses since 1927, so we've been doing this for quite a while. We consider ourselves really the experts on alternative power buses. You can see from this slide that we sell buses powered by propane, gasoline, compressed natural gas, and electricity. We have over 20,000 alternative power school buses on the road today and have sold them to over 900 school districts throughout the US and Canada. But we're here to talk specifically about electric buses. So I'll give you a little bit of a background on where we started. Our current iteration of our electric school bus actually was only introduced a few years ago, but we actually introduced our first electric school bus back in 1992. At that time, we had done some work with Westinghouse Electronic Systems to develop this product. It was probably a little bit before its time back in 92. We only sold about 30 of these electric school buses over the next several years. But it had some issues with weight and range, and we decided to discontinue the bus. I think around the year 2000 is when we sold the last one. But kind of moving ahead to where we are today, how we got back into electric school buses. Going back to 2016, we were awarded a $4.9 million grant from the U.S. Department of Energy, specifically to develop and commercialize a high-powered vehicle-to-grid school bus. So in 2017, we launched our current iteration, and we introduced it at one of the trade shows, the School Transportation News trade show in Reno, Nevada. 1 year later, in September of 2018, we delivered our first school buses to customers in California. Now, jumping ahead to 2020, right now we are the only manufacturer who actually produces and have deployed electric school buses at all three bus types, Type A, Type C, and Type D. There are a few other manufacturers that build buses in certain bus types. We do it in all three today, and the only one that does do that. And we're the only one that offers what they call a CCS1 connector on our bus as standard, and that allows you to charge with either a level 2 charger or charge with DC fast charging. So a customer basically doesn't have to make that decision when they buy the bus. They can charge with either of those different charge types. And right now we are the only school bus, electric bus manufacturer who has as standard vehicle to grid capability when you buy a bus from us. So we think that's actually a pretty big deal as we're seeing more and more interest in V2G.
Hey, Albert, sorry to interrupt. Can you explain that concept, vehicle to grid, just a little bit?
Yeah, I shall have a slide or two on that coming up.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll give you a little more information on how that works and really what the appeal of that is.
Excellent, thanks.
But looking at where we've deployed our electric school buses thus far, if you look on the map to the left, all the blue states is where we've actually sold buses in 14 separate states. Most of those have been in California. That's where most of the interest has been. That's where a lot of the grant funding has been. But we've also sold in 13 other states in really various climates and terrains. You'll see cold climates like North Dakota and on Long Island, but also very warm climates like Arizona and Texas as well. And the buses perform very well, really in all climates. We actually have a bus currently operating in Hawaii as well. So starting to see growth on all parts of the US currently. So if you look to the right, however, if you look at how many buses we sold, a much smaller market, obviously, than passenger vehicles. But in 2018, we sold, I think, 7 units, grew that to over 50 units in 2019. We'll be just over 200 buses by the time we finish 2020. And we're expecting pretty significant growth in 2021 as well. We could easily probably double our sales over the last 3 years in 2021 alone, based on all the interest we're seeing today. Just a quick snapshot of different headlines throughout the U.S. Regarding electric school buses. Really, the interest has been pretty phenomenal. California, as I'd mentioned earlier, certainly were the early adopters. Just last year, they had a real big grant from the California Energy Commission, about $90 million that will fund and deploy about 200 buses when it's all said and done, and a lot of infrastructure as well. But we're certainly seeing interest and pretty big demand in Washington, Florida, Vermont, New Hampshire, Michigan, really several different parts of the US where school districts and states are trying to electrify school bus fleets. So really what's kind of driving all this interest and growth in school buses, really it's for these reasons here. First and foremost, it's zero emissions. Like electric passenger vehicles, they're not hybrids, they're electric only. And they really do produce real clean air for kids, which is real important in the school bus industry. One electric bus actually will clean, I think it'll reduce greenhouse gases by 54,000 pounds per year with just one electric bus. And if you actually measure the air inside an electric bus versus a diesel, it's 6 times cleaner than a diesel bus. So that's a pretty important aspect of electric school buses, is just the zero emissions. Also reduce maintenance costs, really about a 80% reduction in maintenance costs over a typical diesel bus. And that's because there's a lot fewer components, and those components don't require a lot of maintenance. I'll have a slide showing a little bit more detail on that as well. Quiet operation is a nice benefit. A lot less sound pollution in neighborhoods. It's a lot safer for the school bus driver with zero noise whatsoever. We actually have to offer standard a noise generator, which a lot of passenger vehicles have as well, so that when the bus is pulling up to a bus stop or in a school zone, it does make a sound under 20 miles per hour, really just to provide additional safety for folks around the bus so they can hear it coming. Grant funds have been a big driver. These buses obviously are still very much more expensive than a typical diesel bus, about 3 times as expensive as a diesel bus. So all the grant funding that's been available has been a big driver of this growth. For example, the VW Mitigation Trust, which is, I think most of you are probably familiar with, that was a $2.9 billion available that went out to states. And of that, only about 600 million has been awarded so far. But of that 600 million, about half of that has gone to different EV type implementations for vehicles and for infrastructure. And looking at all that, about 50 million of that 300 million has gone specifically for electric school buses. So that's been a big driver to have that funding to offset the incremental cost of a electric bus over a diesel bus. Also outstanding performance, just like passenger vehicles that run on electricity, really good acceleration, even for a school bus, much better than a typical internal combustion engine. So really nothing to apologize on the performance side. They actually perform very, very well. And then lastly is vehicle to grid technology. Certainly the grants have helped offset a lot of this, but a lot of those grants are going to go away over time, and really to offset a lot of the costs, upfront costs, vehicle to grid technology is going to help offset that by providing revenue to school districts. And I'll get into that here in just a moment. So that I did have a slide on the VW. I forgot about that, but that actually shows you there that big red slice of all the monies that have been allocated toward electric vehicles thus far. Almost 50 million has gone to school buses, and it's growing rapidly. Just a year ago, only about 3.4 million had been allocated, and as of June of this year, it's reached a 48.2 million of VW awards going to electric school buses. We talked about the maintenance savings. This kind of gives you a quick snapshot of why it's so significant. I won't read this all off to you, but for example, on a diesel bus, you have to replace the 15 quarts of oil and filter every 6 months. Obviously, no oils on a electric motor. Our bus doesn't have a transmission like many electric school buses do not, so there's no maintenance required for transmission. No fuel system, so no filters to replace there. No exhaust systems, so diesel buses today have pretty sophisticated exhaust systems that require a lot of maintenance. Not required on electric bus. A lot of savings in that respect as well. So now a little bit on vehicle to grid. So vehicle to grid basically just means when you have a stored energy on a vehicle and you can sell that energy back to the utility company. And that's really what it is. And so what you do is basically, because buses are down for a good part of the day, they run in the morning and generally in the afternoon, they can store when they're not running, or they can charge when they're not running. And that stored energy can be made available for utilities to use it during peak times when they need some additional capacity. And it also can be used for school districts, not only to sell back to the utilities, but they can also use it to help power buildings at the school district as well, either during peak times when electricity is high, or during outages when they need to power those buildings for different uses. They can do that with the energy stored on the batteries on these school buses. And sometimes utilities don't even necessarily need to buy back that energy for you to get revenue. Just having the opportunity to buy it back, utilities will know that energy is there. They will pay a fee to the school just to have the opportunity to use that energy if needed. So it's actually a nice benefit to school districts. Right now, we're the only school bus manufacturer that offers this as standard, a standard option on an electric school bus. And they really are, school buses, as I mentioned, are really a good fit for vehicle to grid. First, they have very large batteries. For example, our battery on our school buses is 155 kilowatt hours. So it's big, and therefore it can store a lot of energy. And the buses really aren't used that much during the day. They're used in the morning routes. They come back midday, and then they're used in the afternoon routes. And those usage rates are really very predictable. Basically, they can discharge that energy when demand is at its peak, which is typically midday when you have higher demand. And also they're parked typically during the hot summer months, again, when that's kind of peak demand as well for energy. And so this, like I mentioned, can provide some financial benefits to the school districts as well, because when they're charging is typically in the morning or sometimes midday, but they're charging when demand is lower and the rates are lower, but then they typically can sell back some of that energy when demand is high. So they're charging when it costs less, they're selling it back when the energy companies will pay more. And as I mentioned, just having the opportunity for the utilities to buy energy generally is provide some revenue to the schools. And it also, like I mentioned, can allow the school districts to power some of the school buildings during peak times when energy costs could be high. They can just discharge some of the energy off the bus and power some of those buildings, again, saving them money. So this is kind of a quick look. Jonathan mentioned kind of the outlook for EV vehicles, and pretty substantial. The same with school buses. We don't have good projections on what it looks like in the school bus industry specifically, but we think it's going to probably follow the same trajectory as the rest of the EV industry. So, they believe about maybe 10% of all vehicle sales will be electric by 2025. And we see the school bus industry probably being the same as well. And for us, that would mean about 3,500 school buses by 2025. Today, it's about 300 to 400. So pretty substantial growth. Some of the factors for that is, as I mentioned, V2G is new, but a lot of those projects, once they get implemented, are going to help offset some of those additional costs for school buses. That's going to help the growth. Battery prices are falling pretty rapidly. We're seeing that over the next 2 to 3 years. We're projecting that prices will come down to the point not to match diesel bus pricing, but certainly to make the total cost of ownership equation a lot more attractive for school districts. That'll certainly help grow the EV bus business as well. Battery packs are getting larger. We're looking at additional battery packs on our bus that would allow for even more stored energy, and also some modular packs that allows you to kind of fit the energy source to the size of the bus. We can't do smaller, shorter wheelbase buses today because the battery packs are so large. But as modular packs become available, we'll have the opportunity to do a lot more production on school buses and shorter wheelbases, which appeal to more customers in our industry. And then a lot of states are mandating electrification. You see, for example, in California, they want all school buses to be electrified by the year 2030. That's 30,000 buses alone. A lot of the other states are putting mandates in place in 2035 and 2040 that are certainly going to drive electrification in school buses. And we certainly see a lot more money being allocated for VW. As I mentioned, only about 600 million of the 2.9 billion has been allocated and awarded thus far. So that money is going to stick around for quite some time and help offset that upfront cost of electric school buses. So we do believe the growth is going to be strong, and we're looking forward to that. We have a great product, and we think the future is pretty bright, and we believe this is the future of school bus transportation. That concludes that, Kofi. I can.
Thank you, Albert. Nice job giving us an overview on the school bus industry as it relates to electric vehicles. I'm sure, just a reminder to the audience that if you've got any questions, go ahead and start putting those in the chat, or write them down and get those up to us towards the end of the meeting. Our next panelist, so we have two more. We're gonna move on to Blair next. And Ann serves as the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance Director of Energy Efficient Transportation, and she oversees strategy, programming, and outreach for all of the SEEA's transportation initiatives. She joined SEEA in 2018 and has worked on transportation initiatives over the past 17 years. She serves on multiple boards, including the EV Club of the South, Mothers and Others for Clean Air, and Earthshare Georgia, and holds a bachelor's degree in biology and from Randolph-Macon Women's College, and a master's degree in environmental law and policy from Vermont Law School. And so Ann's going to transition us from the vehicle side to the more infrastructure built environment side of things. And thanks again, Ann, for being here, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Kofi, and to all the sponsors of the event today. It's such a pleasure to be here and to share with you a little bit of information and priorities of what our organization works on. As Kofi mentioned, I serve as the Director of Energy Efficient Transportation for the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. And we are a regional nonprofit organization that works in 11 states throughout the Southeast region on a range of energy policy issues. Our transportation work is focused on increasing the accessibility and availability of advanced transportation, focused primarily on electrification, as it is currently the most efficient option available for use. To that end, just to share with you our goals and objectives of our program, we really serve as a resource to a range of stakeholders on electric transportation issues focused on policy and program development. We support and advise state policymakers from utility commissions to utilities to legislators and others on these issues. And we also work to cultivate state-based leaders in this area. And last but not least, to support increased consumer awareness on these issues. So I want to take us a little step back on this and just, set a little more context. Why are we interested in electric vehicles? And there are a lot of different reasons, but one that is driving a lot of this development across the country, regionally and locally, is the transportation sector is now the #1 source of carbon emissions. And there are multiple benefits to address that in terms of reduced emissions from the vehicles. There's also other benefits, reduced fuel and maintenance costs. As was mentioned with the buses, you have fewer moving parts, and so the costs are going to be a lot lower for maintenance and fuel. Also energy and energy security benefits. We currently spend billions of dollars in just Georgia alone. We send out of state for oil, but using electricity within the state keeps more money circulating in the local economy. EVs also are just super fun to drive and perform better than internal combustion engines, and just very convenient. You can fuel up at home. I mean, that's one of the biggest benefits that I've experienced as an owner. And they also have the ability to help enhance the grid. And you'll hear a little bit more from Georgia Power in a little bit, but there's significant benefits there. And as Albert mentioned, the vehicle to grid opportunities can really help support the grid and potentially provide some emergency energy management. All right, so building on a little bit of what Jonathan mentioned earlier, I wanted to share some other big trends in the industry. As he mentioned, there's more than 1.5 million vehicles in the electric vehicles in the US today. The oil industry has begun to acquire major charging companies. All major auto manufacturers have made commitments to transition all or parts of their inventory to electric. There have been major medium and heavy duty vehicle models announced and deployed, as we heard from Bluebird. Many large and small businesses from Amazon and Walmart have made full commitments to go electric in the very near term. Vehicle cost is declining, and most of the cost of electric vehicles is tied to the battery. And we've seen those costs substantially drop over the past few years and are expected to reach parity with internal combustion engines by 2023. So that's just a few years away. And the range of the vehicles is increasing with every new model that we're seeing released. And we're seeing a whole flood of new models introduced. When I first started working on these issues around 2010, 2011 timeframe, we just had around 6 vehicles that were available in Georgia. Now there's more than 50 vehicles that are available to purchase. So I wanted to share a little bit of, to put the numbers that Jonathan shared into context and take a snapshot of the Southeast. As you'll see here, Florida really is leading the region in terms of EV adoption, followed by Georgia. North Carolina, Virginia, and other states are trailing closely behind. And both of those states now have their own statewide EV goals, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Florida's growth has been primarily driven by the adoption of Teslas. And then Georgia, a lot of ours had to do with the state tax credit, as was mentioned previously. And the charging infrastructure that's being deployed is tracking very closely with the numbers of vehicles in each state. As you can see, they track very closely here. And on the left-hand side, you'll see this is both what's called level 2 charging infrastructure, as well as the DC fast charging stations that are here in each state. All right, so there are a variety of activities and policies that states, municipalities, as well as private businesses are implementing that are driving this adoption. And I know this is kind of a busy slide, but it's just to give you a sense that there's lots of different programs that people are employing to advance EVs or planning for growth in electric transportation. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper in a few of these. All right, so one of the biggest trends is the development of state EV roadmaps or plans. North Carolina was one of the first states in the Southeast to develop a plan. The governor set a goal of 80,000 vehicles to be adopted by 2025, and most recently signed on to a memorandum of understanding to for heavy duty and medium duty vehicles to have 100% of sales of those vehicles be electric by 2030. In Tennessee, they developed their own roadmap with a goal of 200,000 EVs by 2028. And currently in the works, Florida is developing their own EV roadmap as well as a master plan. Earlier this year, the legislature approved House Bill 7018 in Florida, and that essentially requires that the Public Service Commission in the state work closely with the Energy Office as well as the Department of Transportation to develop a plan for transportation electrification in the state. And that's tracking right along with the Energy Office's development of an EV charging infrastructure roadmap, specifically focused on identifying charging infrastructure plan along major corridors throughout the state. And the impetus for that is largely based on emergency management and resiliency in terms of the impacts of climate change. Another thing we spend a lot of time on and is really driving a lot of the current investment in electric vehicles is from utilities. We work closely with a lot of the utility commissions in many of the states on the development of electric transportation programs. There have been 91 approved filings. These are national figures with more than $2 billion of investment in utility infrastructure. And as you can see here, there's nearly $1 billion of additional investment that's currently pending a decision by utility commissions nationally. And if those programs are approved, we'll see a significant growth in additional charging infrastructure deployed by utilities. Now, most of these programs, are proposed by investor-owned utilities and approved by commissions. They do not include some of the rural electric co-op programs. Those are additional programs that I don't have featured here. So what's in a lot of those filings? It includes a combination of a whole bunch of things. As you'll see here, EVSE actually, that's acronymed, that represents a charging station itself. And so the programs include plans for that. Also includes specific EV rates. That would be things like a time of use rate in which a utility offers a lower rate to charge a vehicle, for example, at night, which Georgia Power does, for instance, or Cobb EMC and others. Many of the programs also include education and outreach as a part of the program, and other elements include evaluation and administration. And then others include direct EV incentives. So that includes things like rebates for charging stations. For example, today in Georgia, you can get for example, level 2 charging station for your home and apply to Georgia Power to get a rebate for the program. And many of the rural electric co-ops also offer that program. All right, so I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit deeper on some of the utility programs that are out there. So Duke Energy has, they submitted pilot programs in both North and South Carolina a little over a year and a half ago. South Carolina recently approved a program there. It's around a $10 million program that will allow them to deploy additional, primarily DC fast charging infrastructure through major corridors in that state. They also have a program pending in North Carolina. It's a $76 million program that would run for 3 years that would deploy charging infrastructure, but it also has a vehicle to grid school bus charging program component to it as well. Dominion Energy, they got a new program passed not too long ago, also includes a V2G pilot program there. And then most recently, and this is a fairly new update, they've launched their $20 million program that will provide rebates for charging stations for multifamily housing, workplace, transit buses, and DC fast charging locations. Those rebates will run from around $2,000 to $50,000 per project. And that program is a part of their smart charging infrastructure pilot program approved by their commission in their grid transformation plan. In Alabama, Governor Kay Ivey recently announced additional funding through their Rebuild Alabama legislation that calls for supporting additional charging infrastructure. A large part of her interest and promotion of that program is the manufacturing opportunities that it provides for their states. Mercedes-Benz is developing a new program, a new facility there that will focus on electric vehicles. Also, as I mentioned, Drive Electric Tennessee, they have their own state plan and they're working with stakeholders on individual municipal programs as well as statewide programs that will help support everything from consumer education to municipal policies that could include citywide goals for electric vehicles. In addition to utility charging programs, some of the utilities, including Southern Company, have announced transitioning their own fleets to electric. Southern Company recently announced they'll be transitioning 50% of their own fleet to electric by 2030. And Duke Energy has announced their goal of transitioning 100% of their fleet to electric by 2030. All right, here are a few other just more local case studies. Want to highlight Smart Charge Nashville. This is a program where they're just beginning to collect some data. As I mentioned, there's a real variability in types of programs different folks are deploying. EMCs are launching charging programs, rebates, education, outreach. And then Appalachian Power, for instance, another cooperative is offering rebates. Additional opportunities, as I mentioned, municipalities setting vehicle and charging goals. It's another key trend, as well as public and private fleets setting goals and developing their own infrastructure plans and development, education and outreach. Incentive programs. So some states, Georgia also have incentives for driving in the HOV lanes or incentives for parking. Also building codes. That's a newer trend for municipalities in which, for example, City of Atlanta has passed a building code that will require new construction to include the wiring for charging infrastructure. Also, rideshare electrification programs. Both Uber and Lyft have announced commitments to transition their fleets to electric. Also, I wanted to share with you that regionally, working with Georgia Tech and the Nicholas Institute at Duke University, we've recently launched the Southeast EV Initiative. This initiative brings together multiple stakeholders to share best practices and coordinate the expansion of electric transportation programs in the region. Also, energy offices in 9 states have set up an electric transportation information exchange to collaboratively look at opportunities to advance adoption, charging infrastructure, and economic development. Also, if you want to engage on a more personal level in terms of electric vehicles, I also serve as president of EV Club of the South. We have a very active Facebook page, EV Club of the South group, Facebook. And, you know, you can ask questions about, anything and everything about EVs. We also host a range of events of course, it's been a lot lighter since COVID. But we do have monthly meetings, either in person or online. Also, your utility company. I didn't highlight a lot of Georgia Power's good programs because you're going to hear from them shortly. But you can find out more about what your local utility is doing, whether it's time of use rates or rebates or education and outreach programs to check out EVs. Encourage everyone to, just contact your utility company to see what they offer. And then I've listed a few general education websites here: Electrify the South, Electrify Atlanta, and Plug in America. And then of course, Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, our website. We are more policy focused. So if you have any questions on policy and program development, happy to share additional information with you there as well. But that wraps up my remarks today. But thank you, Kofi, for the opportunity, and I'll pass it back to you.
Hey, thanks, Ann. Nice material and good presentation. Appreciate that. And our last presenter panelist is going to be Darren Epps. He's the electric transportation manager at Georgia Power. His team is responsible for owning and operating more than 40 public electric vehicle fast chargers across Georgia and helping customers install thousands of chargers across through consulting, education, and outreach, and rebates, as as an example in terms of what Ann had mentioned. He holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Georgia. And Darren, thanks again for being here. And you have the floor.
Thanks for having me. And I know we have a video. Did you want to show that now, or?
Yeah, we can go ahead and roll that. I don't know if Bill, if you're able to get that going. And just as a reminder, as he's pulling that up, to get some questions in to the chat. Okay, looks like we're getting a video queued up here.
Georgia Power recently partnered with Pivot Atlanta to deliver a state-of-the-art electric vehicle charging infrastructure project, the largest of its kind in the Southeast. As part of the Cox Automotive Group, Pivot Atlanta's partnership will help enable fleet electrification and encourage the transition to electric vehicles. Located between downtown Atlanta and Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the Smart Technology Project is built to meet current and future charging needs and will serve as a model for other regions throughout the United States. The Georgia Power electric vehicle team partnered with Pivot to determine the needs for fleet service charging today and tomorrow, offering industry experience and expertise to support the turnkey design and build. The installation consists of 26 ChargePoint Level 2 and Level 3 chargers, supported by a vertically integrated cloud-based network, providing connectivity for all units along with monitoring and support. While many of the chargers are dedicated to fleet support, those dedicated to public charging help fill a significant void in the EV charging infrastructure in the Metro South community. The chargers also help meet the increasing demands of the rideshare industry. The Georgia Power EV team's design allows for future expansion and includes additional capacity to accommodate new vehicles, future battery storage, and solar equipment. As our customers continue to transition to electric vehicles, Georgia Power will be here, leading the way. To learn more, visit georgiapower.com/EV.
All right, thank you for that. And I'll share my presentation. Is that coming up?
Yeah, and don't forget to put it on presentation mode. Probably be even easier for the audience. Should be, if you click at the lower, if you look at the menu down at the very bottom of your screen, the bottom right.
Yeah, I got it.
See that? Yep, there you go.
There we go. All right, much better. All right, well, thank you, Kofi. And you know, Kofi, whether he wears a lot of hats, whether it's ARC or this role, and all of them, he's really looked forward. I've been very forward thinking when it comes to electric transportation, really the future of mobility. So I appreciate that, Kofi. Like you said, my name is Darren Epps. I manage our Georgia Power electric transportation team. That video is just an example of one of the big projects we've done. You know, we've been in this space for almost a decade now. We were one of the first utilities to have an electric transportation team. And really all those efforts have come to fruition with some really cool projects. And we really work across the value chain, whether it's rebates, education outreach, events, or what you just saw, helping design and build a major EV infrastructure. So I'm going to focus my comments on infrastructure for this presentation. And so I thought I'd start, since I know not everyone is steeped in the world of electric vehicles, I thought I'd start with just a quick overview. So when we talk about level 1 charging, 110 volt, that's just plugging your car into the side of your wall in any regular outlet. You'll get about 4 or 5 miles per charge. If you have a short commute, this is probably all you need. I used to do this. It was a little bit inconvenient at times, but it worked. Level 2 is 280 or 220 volt. That gets you about 24 miles of charge per hour. I think the data we have shows that most EV drivers put one of these in their garage. Those chargers can run as low as just a few $100. And that gets you charged overnight. These are the chargers you see at workplaces that gets people charged while they work. And then the fast charging is really, really exciting because it's changed so much. You know, just a few years ago, 50 kW was the standard, and that took almost an hour to get totally full, but it was considered new technology. And now that we have 150s out there, and now there's 350s out there, which will fill up a car in about 5 minutes. So the technology is coming along really quick. It's actually coming along faster than the cars can handle it. So no car can actually take 350 right now, but they can take 150 and into the 200. So the charging is ahead of the cars right now, but we're getting closer and closer to simulating that gas station experience. And where you'll see these fast chargers are at restaurants, retail, places where people can easily access off the interstate or a major thoroughfare and get a charge. So what is electric transportation? Well, for us at Georgia Power, it's moving people. And so when we talk about the level 2 and the fast charging, that's called commercial charging. And I'm fairly certain whoever named all these level 1, level 2, and that was probably not in marketing because it does get a little confusing at times. But commercial charging is any of the chargers you see out at retail or restaurants or workplaces or anywhere else. And there are now over 3,000 places to plug in Georgia, which is really exciting. As Ann mentioned, we do have rebate programs. We offer $250 to residential customers who put a charger in their home, and then $500 per charger to commercial customers who put a charger at their business, or whether it be an apartment or anything like that. And then buses. This has been one of the most exciting stories of the past year in Georgia is electric buses. That technology is here. There are 20 electric buses right now at the University of Georgia. Macon Transit just took possession of 2 electric buses, and Chatham Area Transit in Savannah is about to take possession of 6 electric buses. There's also 2 electric buses at Hartsfield-Jackson that they use for shuttles. So really exciting time in the industry for the bus. And we expect to see more and more municipalities, transit agencies, universities to adopt electric. The maintenance is just so much lower. And in Georgia, the cost of electricity is really inexpensive. But this is also moving goods for us. And this is something doesn't get talked about, probably it's not as sexy as the car or the bus, but lift trucks, forklifts. We have offered a rebate per charger on those of $100 to $200 and have converted since 2014 over 5,000 forklifts to electric. And we've really had success here because the total cost of ownership is so much lower with electric, and you don't really have, the personal attachment to a vehicle like you might see with the personal car. It's a forklift. So we've really been able to make the case at warehouses across the state. Seaports, Port of Savannah, if you didn't know, is really one of the most forward-thinking ports in the country. They have been electrifying for the last 5 to 10 years, shore crane, shore power, reefer racks, cranes. They will continue to electrify. They're seeing the cost savings and then the environmental savings as they grow. Airports, the international terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson, Delta's International Terminal, is all electric. And I mentioned the electric buses, so we're seeing it there. Each route is electric truck refrigeration unit. And so these are trucks that park at, say, a farmer's market overnight. And while they wait to unload, they're able to plug in their refrigerated unit on the truck so they don't have to idle on diesel the whole time. So big environmental and economic savings there. And then short haul trucks is the next wave. You might have seen commercials from Amazon touting their move to all electric vehicles by 2030. I can say they're already prepping sites for massive electrification. UPS, we've talked with them, and Ryder, both looking at the future and seeing that the technology is here and the total cost of ownership is getting cheaper than gas. So I wanted to talk about some of our major electrification programs and partnerships we've done. Electrify America is spending $2 billion over a 10-year period, putting in mostly for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And they named Atlanta a spotlight city about a year ago for their next $300 million investment. And so we have already seen them install, I think, 10 massive electric vehicle charging locations. So these are fast chargers, and in some cases, there's 10 places to plug in. So really welcome the partnership with Electrify America. We really told the story of the rebounding growth of EVs in Georgia and the ride share, which I'll mention here. This was a partnership we did a couple of years ago with Lyft, where they brought 50 all-electric vehicles to Atlanta for their rental service. So if you don't have a car but want to drive for Lyft, or your car is too old, or you just don't want to use your own car, you can rent a car for Lyft and essentially pay it down with the more drives you give. And so it's been an incredible study for us and Lyft to see how this works. And what we've seen is, I think we're actually close to 60,000 rides in an all-electric vehicle. The data shows that EV drivers are getting higher tips. They say they're able to build a rapport easier with the rider, talking about what kind of car is this? Is this all electric? That's really cool. And it really is a win-win-win because a lot of the renters live in income qualified locations. They're making more money. They're using our chargers to make a living. And there's economics for them, and then there's the environmental benefit. So it really has been a great story, and we hope to eventually get more of those in the Lyft fleet. Yeah, you saw the video at Cox Automotive at it's the largest installation in the Southeast that you saw in the video. And then MARTA, at 9 different MARTA locations, you can now plug in as you head for the train. So that was a really exciting project we just completed this year as well. And you can't miss those parking spots at MARTA. They're very bright orange. Another exciting piece of news that we got in our rate case. So every 3 years, we have a rate case that sort of dictates our programs and our expenditures. And we were a little bit surprised that we got $24 million from the Public Service Commission to boost electric transportation infrastructure in Georgia. So that was really, really exciting. This money has to be spent by the end of 2022. We have $18 million for Make Ready. So now Georgia Power covers all that infrastructure from the pole to the parking spot, except the charger. So the charger still has to be purchased by the customer. But what this does is remove a massive financial hurdle for businesses, commercial and industrial, to electrify their facilities, their fleets. And it could be an airport, it could be a condo, it could be anything. It'll be an open application that'll start next year. We're really excited about this program and the difference it'll make in Georgia, and very appreciative of the PSC for being so forward-looking. The $6 million for community charger, these are fast chargers for public use that we own and operate across the state. We installed 37 of them starting in 2014. And what this order did was give us $6 million more dollars to continue filling out corridors, putting more charging in Atlanta Metro. And we think we'll be able to put about 30 to 35 more. We have 6 in the ground this year alone. So I think we're up to 43 now live in Georgia. You combine that with what Tesla's doing, Electrify America, EVgo, and you're seeing fast chargers sprout up everywhere in Georgia. And just a little bit more background, what you see on the left is a map of our 37 chargers. We did 37 and then stopped for review and trying to see how the market played out. We were able to put a lot of chargers in corridors to connect communities. So you could get from Macon to Atlanta, or Savannah to Macon, or Augusta to Macon. And so what we aim to do in this next round of funding is to fill out the rest of those corridors and also fill out South Metro Atlanta, where a lot of those Lyft drivers live. And as you see in the red dots, just a function of how the market was 6 years ago, a lot of the fast chargers we put in are north of I-20. And now, because of the Lyft drivers, we need them south of I-20. So working on that right now. And this is just gives you an idea of how things are going to look. So current state, and these are fast chargers. You see what we've done in red and what the other players have done in orange. You see, a lot of charging in North Metro Atlanta, which is where a lot of the market is. Some corridors filled out so people can traverse across the state. And then now here in the next year or so, it's going to look something like this, where we're putting in more chargers in South Atlanta. We're filling out more corridors. You will be able to get from anywhere to anywhere in Georgia, Columbus to Athens, North Georgia down to Savannah, and you will be able to charge. And these charging speeds are getting faster and faster. So that's how we see the network in the near future. And then by the end of 2022, there'll be even more dots on the screen as Tesla and ourselves and Electrify America continue to fill out the map. And that's all I had. Kofi?
Hey, nice, Darren. That's good information. And I think we got a few minutes for some questions as we start to wrap up the meeting. And let's see, one came in earlier from Tom Udell for Albert. And the question is, are you guys working on autonomy for your vehicles?
On school buses? No, we're not.
For school buses?
No,
Okay.
nothing at this time. I think likely the school bus industry will probably trail behind on autonomous vehicles quite a bit, is my anticipation.
That makes sense. Another question from Eric Ganther. 2 questions he has. One, does Bluebird have a relationship with a charger provider? And does Bluebird have any experience with fuel cells?
Nothing with fuel cells. We do get that question occasionally. We've looked at it just somewhat. I wouldn't say we've done any serious consideration of fuel cells at this time. On charger companies, we do have a relationship with a company called Nuvi Corporation, and that's primarily for their DC fast chargers, especially when V2G is being implemented. They developed the communication protocol between the charger and our bus to enable V2G to work. So if a customer is interested in doing vehicle to grid with our school bus, then they would work with Nuvi Corporation with their chargers so that they would communicate and allow the energy to be discharged off that bus.
Okay, thanks. And I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and ask kind of like a very complex question, but I think it's for all the panelists, and it has to do with batteries and battery technology and charging. First question for you guys: do we expect the state of the art technology for batteries to become ubiquitous? And the reason why I asked that question is because of one of your slides, Jonathan, that showed like the different ranges for the different vehicles and models. Why can't there be, I guess, from a layman's perspective, a standard range for any model? And does that have to do with proprietary battery manufacturing, design, and technology? And if so, can we get to something more ubiquitous in terms of like what we see on the gas powered, like V6 versus V8, and fuel efficiencies being very similar, for example? Any thoughts on that? You may not know that or have the answer, but I figured I'd throw that out there since we don't have any other questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any takers to answer that question, so we'll just leave that one.
I think you're going to see a lot of competition. There's clearly differing technologies. And so I think the world that you just described is likely to become more and more the case, meaning there's going to be varieties of designs and types of technology. And eventually we're going to see some clear winners that essentially define, do we have a V8, a V6 type of world? I know that from the economics of the situation that we're projecting that it will be about 3 years from now where the improvement in the efficiency and declines in costs will essentially make EV ownership even more compelling. And that's on the personal side. On the fleet side, you can accomplish that faster because on the fleet side, you have a better ability to catch up on the cost of the vehicle through the usage and the maintenance than a typical consumer does in the miles traveled. So this 3 year horizon, I think, is going to have an enormous amount of evolution.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add onto that as well. There's a lot of research going into the batteries, right? Everything from the component parts of the battery. As you may know, there's precious metals that to get those for the batteries has a lot of environmental consequences as well. And so there's a lot of research going into replace some of those parts with new parts, with new component parts. And we did just a kind of high level brief of some of those big questions that's available on our website that just a couple weeks ago, looking at those bigger questions and what the impacts are going to be to ensure that not only do we get to a place where there's I guess more consistency to your question of the battery, but ensure that the batteries that are made are not creating additional environmental consequences, and that also that the second use life of batteries is maximized.
And thanks, Ann and Jonathan and Keith DeLuca. For you, Darren, the question is, if the political winds blow toward EV, this will also help increase sales. Will Georgia Power be able to keep up with charge station demand in order to reduce lines waiting to charge?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be the greatest problem we ever had. We we'll be doing about probably 30 more fast chargers. And when I say fast charger, we don't do the one-offs anymore. We do 2 in one location. That's been a big learning, so people can trust that there won't be a line. So that's a good question. We did learn that from the first time around. I think others are doing the same. It's putting multiple chargers at a site to reduce lines. And then for if the political winds blow that way and the sales increase, then that would be even more reason for businesses across Georgia to apply for our Make Ready program and have charging put in their facilities. We're already seeing an uptick in EV registrations. You know, it bottomed out after the tax credit went away, but organically grown since then. So we're ready when the market is ready.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and ask this one last question, and I think I'll turn it back over to Tom to close out the meeting. So this is also kind of a personal experience type of question where you've got Tesla has their own chargers and a network of chargers. Do we expect other auto manufacturers to get in that game? And does that mean, so I actually have 2 questions. Does that mean that, you know, is there going to be some, I guess, compatibility if that is the case? And then the other question for you guys is, what's the state of the art on real-time traveler information as it relates to charging availability, charging location, and do you see that evolving into something over time?
I'll take the first crack and then hand it off. So on the first part of the question, I think that was related to, what was the first part again, Kofi?
So that's when, like, for example, Tesla has their own charging.
The standards. Yeah. Okay. So for background, there's really 3 fast charging standards. There's Tesla's proprietary plug. There's what's called a CCS plug, and then a CHAdeMO adapter. So I think CHAdeMO will eventually fade away. More and more cars are going towards CCS. And if you drive a Tesla, you can buy an adapter and use the other chargers as well. So I don't think there'll be any more new standards. You know, Rivian and all these new automakers are just going to use CCS. So I think CCS will be the main standard, and Tesla will have its proprietary, but those will be able to interact. As far as the second part of the question, all the chargers we put in are networked, and so are really the rest. All fast chargers, for the most part, are network chargers. So you can pull up an app and see if it's available, how many cars are there, when it will be available. So you can pull up that information in real time using your, whether it's a ChargePoint app or whatever network it is, you can find that.
All right, well, thanks for.
Yeah, sorry.
Ahead,
I think Tesla, you can see exactly how many, if you punch in, you know, where you want a fast charge, it'll show you, 6 out of 10 spots are in use, and that changes in real time.
Okay, thanks again to our panelists for a wonderful discussion and wonderful content. I learned a lot, and pleasure moderating the discussion. And Tom, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
All right, Kofi, appreciate all of the folks on the panel. Learned a lot. I love me some alternative fuel vehicles. Just wanted to remind everyone that there is not an ITS Georgia meeting in November. But we will be having some training in December, so keep your eyes out for that. Again, another plug for the time capsule. If you have anything interesting from 2020 that you'd like people to gaze upon in 2030, or if you'd like to write a letter, by all means, get that in. So with that, we'll close out. Thanks everybody for participating.